As a web developer or designer, you should be very familiar with using CSS or cascading style sheets to change the way that a website appears. Now, SharePoint uses a lot of CSS, and not just the usual classes and IDs, but complex combined selectors and pseudo classes. So be prepared to have your CSS skills tested, because when you're customizing a SharePoint site, you're not just going to create your own CSS, you're going to need to tap into what SharePoint is already doing with it and add to it, not just replace it. Now, if I'm looking at any website and I really want to know what's going on with CSS, say with this team site here, the first thing I'm going to do is something simple like right-click the page and click View Source just to see what I can see behind the scenes here. And without even doing a search, I can see that I've got 3 links here to style sheet files, something called search.css and wiki.css and core-v4.css. Now, whether I recognize the rest of the path or I give it meaning doesn't really matter. We are linking to external CSS files. But if I were to come down a little further, I'm also going to see that I have some inline styles being created. It's not just a link to external files, but I can see some CSS rules here. And in fact, if I searched on the word style, I'd be able to click next and actually navigate and see various places where that style is being used. And I've got some displays being turned on or off. Now, you may see more or less of this if you're looking at something different than a typical team site, but we're both linking to external style sheets and we're using inline styles here. But the most important part of this is this line here, the link to the style sheet called core-v4.css. This is the main cascading style sheet file for SharePoint. It's really the key to 99% of SharePoint CSS. We've got another couple of files here, wiki.css because the site is using wikis, and search.css. If search was disabled, that file would actually disappear. But the thing is, we can't just say, okay, there's 3 CSS files, great, show me where they are so I can go and change them. See, it's not that easy because these files can actually change. For example, here I'm linking to this core-v4.css, but if, for example, I went into this site, changed the settings of it, decide to change the theme, I'll select Construct, click Apply, go back to the home page, and then do a right-click View Source again. Now I can see that here I'm not linking to core-v4.css anymore. I'm linking to something that, for me, is core-v4-8a0abd2f.css. Because what's happening is during the process of requesting a SharePoint page, the fact that I had this browser open and I clicked a link or I typed in a URL, the SharePoint server is getting the request for this page. It's looking up information in the database and it's actually combining several different CSS files and sending me back that constructed link, that generated link in my source that's building on the fly the CSS that I'm looking at. And I'm going to change this theme back because I really don't need it right now. So I'll just go back and right at the top, I've got the default no theme selection, click Apply, and back to the home page. The thing is, we need to understand these CSS files that are being linked to, but we typically don't replace any of the provided CSS files that SharePoint has. We're going to add to them. Because even if we wanted to change something that's been written in this core-v4.css file, we might not change it directly. We'll simply redefine it, and we'll make sure that our definition will come last, and we'll use the idea that CSS has of the last in wins rule to provide our own styles. But you see, CSS is everywhere in SharePoint. It's how most of this layout is being done. And it's easy to assume that we can just change an existing CSS file and be done with it. But as you've seen, the CSS pipeline, if you will, in SharePoint is complex, and we need to understand exactly where to insert ourselves into it in order to achieve the visual results that we want.